Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Earlier today, I did a video that was a massive live stream going through all of the details of the Forbidden Sanctum announcement and also the patch notes. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video and also at the end of the video. But if you just want the too long didn't watch, because that stream did go for nearly 4 hours, I'm going to condense it here and go through the key features with you without going into every single little change that's going to be happening. Now, I do suggest that you read the patch notes as well, because there's going to be things that are probably going to affect any build you're planning hiding in there somewhere, even if they're not something that I cover here. So there's going to be a new challenge league as usual, and this is called the Forbidden Sanctum. This is designed to be somewhat like roguelike games, and you are going to have an additional resource. This is not life. This is something that can cause you to fail. Now, those of you that have played Darkest Dungeon might be familiar with the stress mechanic in that game. That was the thing that came to mind when I was seeing this. Suffering hits from various telegraph boss attacks will cause your character to lose resolve. If your resolve bar falls completely to 0, then you will end up being completely defeated in the Forbidden Sanctum, and you will miss out on some of the powerful end rewards. So you're going to want to mechanically dodge a lot of things in there, as well as trying to build as powerful a character as you can in order to be able to get through. There's a number of other mechanics as well involving packs and the like. Those are things we're going to have to work out while we are actually playing with the mechanics, because we don't yet have enough information to say all that much about it. That said, one of the interesting mechanics is the deferring of loot. So here is an example of a screen where you can choose to receive 2 Orbs of Horizon now, or you can choose to defer them a little while, and at the end of the current floor of the Forbidden Sanctum, you get 6 Gem Cutters Prisms, which is a much better reward, or you can defer it for ages, defer it forever nearly, and receive 18 Chaos Orbs upon completing the entire Sanctum. Of course, if you end up failing the Sanctum, then that's 18 Chaos Orbs that go straight down the toilet, so you miss out on all those rewards. There's a number of other little things as well. Templar Relics, which has a new inventory slot that is only going to exist for this league. It's not something that's going to go core, they've already pretty much said that. And there's going to be a number of new bosses for this mechanic. However, some of the other things that are coming in this, there's going to be a new couple of changes to the Atlas. These are things that will be immediately available in Standard as well. These are not something you need to play the Sanctum League to get, although everything we've discussed so far is Sanctum League exclusive. So we're going to have 2 new Atlas memories. Kerak's Memory of the Pantheon, which is going to add shrines to various maps. These shrines are going to be themed around various Pantheon monsters and could be particularly lucrative. So here's an example where you've got Lunaris themed shrine, and we don't know exactly what that shrine's going to do, but it could be fairly impactful. And there is Einhar's Memory of Harvest Beasts, which is going to cause the areas to contain Einhar and to contain capturable harvest beasts. These are going to empower some very specific harvest crafts. Some of the ones that have been spoiled are Reroll 1 mod on Watcher's Eye, which is a huge thing, and Reroll 1 Synthesis Implicit on an item. So these are going to be things that are much more specialized than normal harvest crafts. And I think that you'll find that these are pretty much Trade League exclusive. Only the truly obsessed player will be able to use these well in SSF, but if you're in Trade League, I think there'll be a lot to find in Einhar's Memory of Harvest Beasts. Additionally, we have the Fracturing Orb. This is replacing the existing Fracture and Item Harvest Craft. The existing Harvest Craft is being removed entirely, and that's going to mean that Sacred Crystallized Life Force can be used on other things. Instead, that Fracture Craft is going to be given to Harbinger content. To be polite, Harbinger content got stuffed around a little bit with the changes that happened in 3.19 with the Divine Orb and Exalted Orb swap. And rather than introduce Divine Shards, which is one thing that a lot of players had requested GGG do to address this, they're going for a different solution instead. They're going to introduce Fracturing Shards. Fracturing Shards combined to a Fracturing Orb, and these are going to be particularly interesting because this is a mechanic that is extremely powerful, and it's something that's actually desirable at a lot of different price points. So if it turns out the Fracturing Orbs are extraordinarily rare, and when we say extraordinarily rare, let's say 25 times as rare as an Exalt Shard to get a Fracturing Shard, then in that situation, Fracturing Orbs will be very expensive, but they will also be something that there will be sincere demand for, even if they end up being 15 Divine Orbs each. But if they're more common than that, if they end up being only 5 times as rare as an Exalt Shard, which is still pretty rare, but it's not super rare, then in that situation, there'll be plenty more Fracturing Orbs going around. That'll push the price down, but they will still be in demand, and people will start using them on items that are otherwise not worth using them on. I'm looking forward to this for 2 reasons. The first thing is that it's just easier to make only one trade if you want to make a Fracture Craft. Buy a Fracture Orb off someone. You don't need to instead mess around with buying various red life force off one player, then sacred crystallized life force off another. The other thing that'll be really interesting will be watching the oscillation of this item's price over the league, and there'll be times when it'll be more expensive, there'll be times when it'll be cheaper. When it's cheaper, it's something you'll be able to snaffle up in trade. Finally, if you're playing in solo self-found, this is probably something you can actually farm towards yourself. If you're playing in Ruthless, I don't think this is going to be accessible at all. It may exist in Ruthless, but I think it'll be so rare that most people will just never see one. Now, there are a number of new skill gems that are coming, including a number of Vaal gems. So you have Vaal Cleave, which is actually a really interesting one. Normal Cleave got a small buff last league, but Vaal Cleave is the interesting mechanical change that I think Cleave needs in order to be something more interesting than it used to be. So here, Vaal Cleave is going to get a huge boost to radius. It's going to grant Culling Strike, and also, if you successfully kill a rare or higher rarity monster, not only will you gain Culling Strike for a long duration, which by default is 20 seconds, you'll also gain 60% more Cleave area of effect. Now, I've run the numbers so you don't have to. That is 26.5% more multiplier to your radius. And you'll gain 60% more Cleave damage to enemies that are on low life, which is equivalent to getting 30% more damage. But perhaps most interesting, not necessarily strong, but interesting, when you deliver a killing blow to an enemy with the Vaal version of Cleave, you will get to steal that rare enemy's mods, just like you had a Headhunter equipped for that strike. Now, this is something that doesn't stack with Headhunter, but it's an interesting mechanic, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to use. I think that Vaal Cleave is going to be one of those things that will be a lot of fun if you just want to goof off in the league. You want to play something that's been really bad in the past, but that's been buffed considerably, and that should be pretty good now without being extraordinarily good. Then that's Vaal Cleave. It'll have a lot of fun toys, and it should be pretty good. Vaal Flicker Strike looks much stronger potentially, and the Vaal version of Flicker Strike repeats 25 additional times. However, it has a penalty to damage with ailments, but it does stack all of the hits together. So if your Vaal Flicker Strike only has one enemy that's a valid target, and you strike that enemy 25 times with it, let's say that you critically strike it 5 times and you non-critically strike it 20 times. And let's furthermore say that you have a 15% chance to ignite with non-crits and a 100% chance to ignite with crits. In this situation, your 5 crits will all contribute ignite damage, and then in addition to that, 3 of your 20 non-critical strikes on average, it might actually be more or less depending on variance, will also contribute damage to the Vaal Flicker Strike's capacity to ignite. So it will ignite as though you hit the monster 8 times. There'll be a 70% less multiplier on that, so it'll be 2.4 times the normal ignite. But that's nothing to sneeze at, and as your character gets more powerful, these numbers are all going to go up. You're no longer going to crit only 5 times, you might start critting 15 times out of the 25, and you're no longer going to be 15% chance to ignite, you might be 60% chance to ignite on the ones that are non-crits, and then at that point, you are inflicting a staggering ignite. That's going to make Vaal Flicker Strike do some serious damage to bosses with ailments, if you're willing to go that way. Of course, you can just focus on hitting instead. That's viable too. Volcanic Fissure is a skill that I'm struggling to find a particular use for. It's somewhat of a mixture between Tectonic Fissure and also Earth Shatter, and I kind of feel like you're probably going to want to use one of those skills rather than it, but maybe I'm wrong, maybe the numbers on this end up being good. This is something to play around with, but I'm not convinced yet. And finally, we've got Frozen Legion, which is the skill that Duresso uses when he conjures 6 ice clones that all strike in at you. Frozen Legion is a copy of that skill, and it requires certain weapon types. For some interesting reason, it is both a spell and an attack gem, which is something that hasn't existed before to the best of my knowledge, other than a couple of sort of hybrid weird cases like Battle Mage's Cry. And this does some interesting stuff. I don't know that this is particularly strong, but I'm willing to give it a bit of a try and find out. Now, unique items are getting a substantial overhaul. There's a couple of new ones. Eternal Damnation is an item that looks incredibly strong in conjunction with Lawweave. So you have 5% penalty to all maximum resistances. Lawweave erases that. So if you've got a Lawweave that says all your maximum resistances are 77%, and you equip Eternal Damnation, they all remain 77%, including Chaos Resistance. And then Eternal Damnation has gain additional elemental damage reduction equal to half your Chaos Resistance. So if you can cap that Chaos Resistance at 77% or 78%, which is the cap for Lawweave now, then suddenly you are looking at having 38, 39% multiplicative damage reduction for elemental damage. This is really powerful. This is a super strong defensive amulet. It doesn't have any offensive stats on it, except I guess you could maybe say mana is an offensive stat, but basically this is a pure defense amulet. If you're looking for that, this is something you can't go wrong with. Next you have Progenesis, which is a very defensively minded flask. It is like a half-strength Petrified Blood, but without any of the drawbacks. While this is active, 25% of life lost from damage taken occurs over a 4-second period instead. That's only from hits, it does not apply to dots, but it is something that is very, very strong. Progenesis looks like it'll be really good. I believe this is going to drop from the Uber version of the Maven encounter. We have Soul Taker, which is getting buffed to the moon. Fair warning, Soul Taker is going to be rarer in 3.20 than it's been in the past. In the past, it was a tier 2 rarity unique. This is equivalent to Chevron's Wrappings. It's about 4 times rarer than unique items like Cold Iron Point, about 16 times rarer than unique items like Tabula Rasa, but it is several times more common than unique items like Doriani's Prototype. We know it's getting made rarer, and there's a lot of speculation it's going all the way up to Headhunter rarity, but we'll have to find that out once we get to actually play around with it. So this item is not going to be common, but its stats are getting a huge boost. And Starforge is also getting a huge boost in this league. Starforge is going to be close to its legacy stats in terms of its explicit mods, but its baseline damage is going to be way higher than it was back when Starforge was a meta item. This is going to make Starforge something that is viable for longer than it is at the moment. If you have a look at this one, this doesn't even have quality on it, and it's currently doing an average of about 700 DPS, but once you add quality onto that, it's going to get a little bit higher again. This is not extraordinary damage, and you can surpass it with an extraordinary rare, but this is far, far, far above the sort of rares you're going to pull out of encounters like Heist in general, unless you get extremely, extremely lucky. And at that point, fantastic. Congratulations, you've surpassed Starforge, you've got yourself something magnificent. Arch Nemesis is gone, we've discussed that already, and there's going to be some changes to jewels. So we already knew about the changes to ailment mitigation and jewels, but there's going to be a massive overhaul of unique jewels. This is one of the new ones, Witchbane, plus 10 to intelligence, and when you kill an enemy affected by a non-aura hex, you become immune to curses for the remaining hex duration. There's a number of other ones of these new unique jewels, some of which are really good. One of them causes modifiers to the duration of ignites on you to also apply to other ailments on you. So this means that it will deal with things like brittle, sap, shock, scorch, and the like. Ruthless is coming. I did a whole video on that. I'll put a link to it in the very end of this video. So when this video has 20 seconds left, I will put up some information on my thoughts on Ruthless. I have been participating in the alpha. I have got a character to level 70 in Ruthless. I had a lot of fun playing it. And my current thoughts are that I'm going to play the core game until about day 5 of the league. Once I feel like all of the secrets of the Forbidden Sanctum have been reported on, at that point I'm going to re-roll in Ruthless. The reason for that is that because of the way I like to play the game, I think Ruthless will be more fun for me personally. You might not agree, and if that's the case, then I would encourage you not to play Ruthless. I'd encourage you to ignore it. Just like I don't find solo self-harm more fun, so I mostly ignore that it exists. But if you do think that it's fun, then you should give it a go. Then there's just the usual microtransaction ads. There are some pretty spectacular new MTX that are in the new packs, so that's something if you're interested in looking flash, or particularly having some really funny little MTX, then these are both pretty good. I'm probably actually going to end up buying both of the high tier packs, but ultimately it's up to you to decide which ones you want to buy. And if you want to sit on them until you've seen how good the league is in play, then by all means do that too. That's entirely your choice. So let's go through the actual patch notes themselves. We are not going to discuss everything because if we do that, we're going to end up repeating a 3 3/4 hour stream from before. There is a new challenge league. We've already discussed that this is happening. It's going to be an economy wipe. This is something that's popular with probably 85% of the player base of PathOfExile. If you're in the 15% that like to play standard though, do not feel any pressure to deviate from that. Play the league that is most fun for you. That is something that's really important. If you don't think that the Forbidden Sanctum content looks exciting, if you like being on an established powerful character with an established, well-defined atlas, then you should stick in standard. On the flip side, if you are someone who, like me, enjoys the fresh start, then jump into the Sanctum League and have some fun there. New content and features. Ruthless is coming. We've already discussed that a little bit. Frozen Legion, Volcanic Fissure, and Cursed Ground support are coming. Cursed Ground is something I discussed in a previous video. It is going to cause your curses that are linked to it to instead affect an area on the ground. Hex Bloom causes hexes that you inflict on enemies to proliferate to nearby enemies when the enemy that is affected by them dies. There are 8 new Vaal skill gems. This is going to be interesting. Not all of these are known. Vaal Cleave, which is the one that has the Headhunter-like effects. Vaal Flicker Strike, which is kind of ridiculous. Vaal Blade Flurry, absolutely nothing is known about that. Vaal Venom Gaia, absolutely nothing is known about that. It's worth saying that Venom Gaia is already a really competitively powerful skill, so this is something that could make that skill even better. Vaal Molten Strike, Vaal Caustic Arrow. Caustic Arrow again is a pretty good skill. Vaal Volcanic Fissure, this is one of the new skills, and Vaal Smite. Smite is also a competitive skill at the moment. Introduce the Fracturing Orb and Fracturing Shards. Fracturing Shards come from Harbingers, and when you've got a stack of 20 of them, they become a Fracturing Orb. Added 15 plus new unique items, including one that was a commission, and 3 that were designed by winners of boss kill events. Added 10 new divination cards. We only know 1 of these so far. 5 of these were designed by supporters, i.e. commissioned, and 5 of them were designed by winners of boss kill events. Added 2 new Atlas memories we've already discussed. The Calandra's Touch unique ring has been added to the core drop pool. I expect this will be staggeringly rare. I expect that this will be Headhunter level rarity. Very, very few people will find this, but it's one of those things that is a massive drop that can drop for you. This item is actually not as good as a lot of people suspect. People look at it and say, hey, this is ridiculously good. This is like having a mirror. The thing is that often you don't want the same stats on your left ring as your right ring. So if you were to imagine, if you had a complete access to an item editor, you probably would not put the same stats on your left ring and your right ring. For that reason, Calandra's Touch tends to be quite a bit weaker than a mirror in practice, but it is still a very, very good item. Broadly speaking, I expect this will be in the 50 to 100 Divine Orb range this league, assuming that it is the same rarity as the Squire. It'll be more expensive than the Squire because I think there will be more demand for it, but I do not think it will be anything like Mageblood or Headhunter, because Mageblood and Headhunter are completely transformative to gameplay. That said, there'll be some standard players that will try to seek this item out so that they can have it in their standard collection, and those players may push up the price in 320 specifically, but then 321, I think that factor will go away. Atlas changes. I did a whole video discussing the changes that are happening to Eldritch Altars and Maven Witness, but there's going to be a number of changes to maps that are being added to the Atlas and removed from it. Some of the interesting ones, Haunted Mansion is coming back. Haunted Mansion drops the Apothecary now because it has the blood_mage_boss map tag. And this means that it is one that is going to drop the Apothecary. This is a potentially big deal. I expect a lot of people will be farming this. Fair warning, the Apothecary cannot drop in normal circumstances in maps that are tier 5 and lower, and it can only drop from rare and unique monsters in tiers 6 and 7. So you want to look for tier 8 and up Haunted Mansions, otherwise you're not going to be getting yourself an Apothecary out of it, and then that's something that is not going to come up very often at all. It seems like the Apothecary is a little bit more common than 1 drop per million items. So that is very, very rare, but it does drop, and it is actually the main source of Mage Bloods that exist in the Trade League economy, is from these divination cards. Burial Chambers is back. That is one of the maps that drops the Doctor outright. And also, there's a few other things that are coming back that are popular. There is Estuary, there is Coves, and there's a Toxic Sewer among the better ones. Plus, there's a few stinkers coming back. Mineral Pools is my literal least favourite map that is an outdoor tile set in the game. I think Cells and Dungeon are worse, but if you're going to take an outdoor tile set, Mineral Pools is one of the worst. Primordial Blocks is interesting as well because it has a hideout, and I don't have that hideout, and this map has been off the Atlas for a couple of leagues. It's going to be back, and so you're going to be able to get your hands on the Primordial hideout if you don't already have it. It is very rare. It's like 1 per couple of 100 maps. So if you want to chase that down, you are definitely going to want to 10 times or maybe even 12 times favorite Primordial Blocks, but it'll be something that you can get. A number of maps are getting removed from the Atlas. Some of the popular ones here, Arid Lake is taking a holiday, Belfry is taking a holiday, Bramble Valley, which is the opposite of popular, is taking a holiday, as is Cells. And then there's Fungal Hollow, which is a really nice looking map tile set, even though it's a medium quality tile set for layout. Wastepool is taking a holiday, which is sad. Jungle Valley is taking a holiday, which is sad. But most of the rest of the maps that are going away are pretty mediocre. Mudgeyser and Parks being the other good ones. All in all, I think this is pretty much a wash. We're losing a bunch of bad tile sets, gaining a bunch of bad tile sets, losing a bunch of good tile sets, gaining a bunch of good tile sets. But the big change is that the Primordial Hideout and the Haunted Hideout are going to be available again. If you haven't got those, then you can definitely try to start target farming them this league if you want. Definitely unlock those maps and push for them on your Atlas. Now, there's a number of changes to divination cards. Of particular note here, Gift of Asenath is now going to drop in the Grotto map. That's because Dig map is being retired. So Gift of Asenath is for a double corrupted Asenath's Gentle Touch. This divination card was staggeringly rare until 3.19. 3.19 massively buffed the drop rate on this card. It's still very rare, but it is something that you will occasionally find if you run Grotto maps. When I say occasionally, I do mean that you're going to still need to run dozens to get one copy of the card on average, but it is going to drop, whereas it used to be that it was one per several hundred, maybe one per 1,000 maps, and as a result, you pretty much never saw it. The Nurse and the Offering are both going to drop in Carcass map. I don't think people are going to be particularly happy about running that map. It is a pretty bad tile set, and even though it's got 2 good divination cards, I don't think that's going to be enough of a pull when there are better maps that have that there. The Vaal Power divination card is back, rewarding Doomfletch. Akel's Prophecy is being re-enabled, and this is going to award a double corrupted, unique, elegant round shield. This is going to be a lot of fun because almost everyone that turns this in is going to get the Oppressor. But then one person out of every several hundred is going to get really lucky and is going to hit a Squire. We don't know the exact rarity here. If you were to ask me to take a stab at it, I would say that it's going to be something of the order 1 in 1,000 copies of this divination card set are going to result in a double corrupted Squire. So when it happens, it's going to be extremely memorable, and it's just going to be a lot of fun watching people turn this in and just get Oppressor, 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 one after another, and just watch their spirits get crushed. If you're a terrible person like I am, this card is going to drop in the Temple of Atsuadal. The Transformation Divination card, which used to drop a double corrupted Fated Unique, is going to drop a Tainted Mythic Orb. Now this card previously dropped from Metamorphs. We don't know if it'll be there or not, but it seems like it probably will be because there's no information that it's swapping around in location. An Ode in the Wind Divination card used to award the Prophecy to upgrade Asenath's Mark. It now just grants the pre-upgraded item. And the Mad King Divination card has been re-enabled and now awards an Ultimatum Aspect. So this is one of the 4 pieces of the Ultimatum that lets you fight the Trialmaster, and this card can be found in the Caldera, the Colosseum, Dark Forest, and Reef maps. If you're ever wondering, this is King-related maps. So the Caldera is Calm, the Colosseum is the Sword King Duresso, the Dark Forest is Rigwald, and the Reef is the Brine King. Archnemesis is gone. We discussed that in a previous video, so there's not much more to say there. Eldritch Altars, we've discussed that in a previous video, not much more to say. The Atlas tree is getting a number of changes here. The main thing is that support for bossing is mostly being removed from the Atlas tree and granted to you automatically. There's a couple of exceptions, and GGG said they're looking for a more permanent fix, but broadly speaking, the things that just added flat loot to encounters, like X% increased chance for the Elder to drop a Watcher's Eye, these are just getting baked in directly, so you're going to always have those allocated. Additionally, there'll be some ways that you can further specialize into some of the content that can be blocked on the passive tree. So things like Abyss, where there is a node that allows you to block Abyss entirely, there's going to be more specialization options available for Abyss on the tree. It also looks like, from what was shown in the live stream, that there is going to be a removal of that annoying sextant cluster, which is something that I'm actually really happy to see. It used to be a tax. Every time you wanted to roll sextants, you had to spec into the node that said your sextants roll with 1 additional mod. It looks like that's been removed, although GGG haven't completely confirmed that there. The full Atlas passive tree will be revealed before the launch of 3.20, and if it's revealed on a day that I'm at home, I am going to do a live stream discussing it. I'm also going to do a live stream discussing the Ruthless passive tree at some point. Jewels and ailment mitigation. I did a whole video discussing this. There is a little bit more information though now. We now have hard numbers on the various ailment mitigation mods that are available, and we also have a firm list of what's being removed in terms of jewels. And I gotta say that a lot of unique jewels that people have some affection for are being removed. Replica Conqueror's Efficiency is gone, Coated Shrapnel is gone, and there's a few other ones that are being removed. Additionally, I don't know what is happening to Energy from Within. Energy from Within is the node that transforms life nodes to instead affect Energy Shield at a percentage of their value. However, there is a divination card that grants a double corrupted version of this. I don't know what is happening to that divination card, because in the future, Energy from Within is going to be a corruption-only jewel. And that means that it's going to be something that you can't get Vaal implicits on. Unless GGG decide that when you apply a Vaal Orb to a jewel and it bricks into a corruption-only unique, that it ends up with 1 implicit if it was a Vaal Orb and 2 if it was the Corruption Chamber. I don't know if that's something that they're planning, but at the moment, there is a divination card that drops from Doedre that provides an item that you otherwise cannot get, and that is that Energy from Within double corrupted jewel. Number of other changes there, but basically the list of unique jewels that currently exist in the game that are going to be general drop anywhere items are very small. Inspired Learning, Intuitive Leap, Lionized Fall, Might of the Meek, Pure Talent, Unending Hunger, and Unnatural Instinct. and the corruption-only ones, Azra's Reign, Brute Force Solution, Careful Planning, Chiller Corruption, Efficient Training, Energized Armor, Energy from Within, Fertile Mind, Fevered Mind, Fluid Motion, Fortress Covenant, Fragility, Healthy Mind, Hidden Potential, Inertia, Pacifism, Powerlessness, Quickening Covenant, Rain of Splinters, Reckless Defense, Seething Fury, Self-Flagellation, Soul's Wick, The Golden Rule, and To Dust. So a lot of things are going away there. Some skills are getting nerfed in this because those skills are losing their various threshold gems that they had. And with those, some of them are getting compensation by the gem itself being improved. But in the context of Spark and Ethereal Knives, these are not getting enough to compensate for what they're losing. So Spark and Ethereal Knives are getting considerable nerfs here, and that's probably more than those skills deserve. Okay, so moving on to curses. Curses, the only new information over what we've discussed previously on this channel, is hard numbers for some of the changes. So the key thing that's interesting here is Hex Blast. Hex Blast is getting a big overhaul. Hex Blast is getting an increased cast time, 1 second up from 600 milliseconds, mana cost increase, and it is going to get substantially more damage at high gem level, but actually not all that much. It's going to do 100% more damage with hits if the enemy is hexed, and 40% more damage with ailments, and this is at the expense of all of the old Doom scaling that it had. This spell's cast time is added to its cooldown if triggered, and it removes the hex after damaging. It now has 340% effectiveness of added damage, previously 310%. This is interesting in that Hex Blast is getting a considerable nerf for self-cast. Both Hex Blast Ignite and Hex Blast Crit are worse than they used to be. But what is not getting nerfed, and what might actually be quite a lot better, is Hex Blast Traps. And I've been discussing over on the PathOfExile build subreddit a possible build around this. I'm giving some serious thought to playing a Hex Blast Trapper that inflicts poison as its main way of dealing damage. This looks like it has some potential, but it is still a work in progress. So keep an eye open here, and there's a lot of work that's being done theory crafting wise over on the PathOfExile build subreddit where people are discussing this concept a little bit more. There's also a number of corner case questions that need to be answered when it comes to Hex Blast and various mechanical things. How does it interact with Blasphemy? How does it interact with a Profane Proxy Curse? How does it interact with Cursed Ground? Does it actually remove the curse from the monster until that monster removes itself from that cursed area and then re-enters it? Or does it just simply recognize, hey, that enemy's got a hex on it. Oh, I'm going to try and remove that and I'm going to fail. We don't know how that's going to work. Impending Doom is also getting some changes, and that's something that I don't see quite getting there. My initial thought with this was to link it to trap support, but people have proven me wrong on that. It has a cooldown of 150 milliseconds, which is something that kind of bricks that idea, and I don't see a way around that. Now, we also have hard numbers on just how much the various hexes are being changed. The too long didn't read version of it is that if you are hexing a map boss, it should be roughly net neutral / slight buff. If you are hexing a bigger boss, it should be a big, massive buff. And if you're hexing a trash mob, it should be a nerf. That's the broad strokes argument that's going on there, although there will be some corner cases. A couple of other things that are important here. Despair Curse is getting a few significant changes to how it works mechanically, and these are going to reduce exactly how powerful it is on poison attack builds, and potentially reduce how powerful it is on poison trappers such as Seismic Trap. However, the fact that these hexes are being buffed so much on bosses means that Seismic Trap is actually getting a net buff. And there's another thing that's going to affect Seismic Trap Poison later as well in these patch notes. Seismic Trap Poison is probably one of the biggest winners out of these in terms of top-end meta builds from 3.19. I really hope GGG actually address this because at the moment I am feeling that in order to keep up with people, I'm probably going to feel compelled to play Seismic Trap Poison. And I know that that's a feeling that's going around amongst a number of people who are more experienced than me, particularly among people who are top-end racers. They're feeling that they're compelled to play Seismic Trap whether they want to or not. If GGG were to nerf Seismic Trap properly, then Explosive Trap would take over. People who genuinely like the trap play style would still have something to play. And people who don't like the trap play style would simply play something else that they find more fun, because then Seismic Trap would no longer be so good that they're going to feel they need to do it. Anyways, rant aside, let's go and have a look at everything else. This is just the rest of the curse changes. Nothing else that's really significant. There are some significant things, and I do recommend reading this. A lot of people have expressed concern about the occultist changes here. These are a small net nerf, but I don't think they're anything significant, and I do think the occultist is still going to be a top 5 ascendancy after these. Additionally, there's some slight nerfs to the Inquisitor Ascendancy. These are also minor, and I do believe that we will see the Inquisitor remain a top 5 Ascendancy. In-game unique weapons come up next. A number of unique weapons are getting massive buffs in patch 3.20. Now, these are also getting made rarer at the same time. Asri's Disfavor is getting buffed to the moon. It's getting more damage. It's getting 30% quality of socketed support gems instead of the old +2 to the level of socketed support gems. It's getting +10 to weapon range instead of +2. It's basically miles better than it used to be. Beano's Kitchen Knife getting lots more damage. Bloodseeker, lots more damage. Divinarius getting lots more spell damage on it. This is going to be one of the best spellcaster weapons around, and this is going to be a genuine chase item that people are really going to want to get their hands on. Essentia Sanguis is going to get a tremendous increase in the amount of lightning damage it deals, as in, when we say an increase, we mean a 2.5 times more multiplier to the amount of lightning damage it deals at the low end, and if the Divine Orb rolls well, it's going to be 3 times more damage. This is going to do a lot of damage, and it's still going to keep its other unique abilities. The Kingmaker and Soultaker unique axes are getting buffs to their damage. This actually ends up being a net nerf to Animate Guardian as a skill, because Animate Guardian usually used Kingmaker not because they cared about the damage that the Kingmaker axe actually did in combat, but because of the buffs that it provided. This is going to now be more expensive to access than it used to be. Kitava's Feast is getting a pretty minor buff. Light Eye's Glare is getting buffed to the moon. It's getting a huge damage boost on it. Like, we're talking really out of sight. Maroi Equi is getting a modest damage boost from solid to strong, but it's only going to be strong. It's not going to be extraordinary. The Savior is getting a big damage boost. The Soul Taker we've already discussed. Replica Soul Taker is going away entirely. Starforge is getting a damage buff, and the meme of items getting Starforged is now over, unfortunately. I had been joking about various things that GGG could do to further nerf Starforged, because I just wanted to throw fuel on the fire, but it turns out that it is actually getting buffed. Varanustra is getting buffed. Voidforge, though, is the big exciting one. No longer going to have 30 to 60% increased physical damage, but it is gaining 700% of weapon physical damage as extra damage of a random element, previously 300%. This is a tremendous amount of extra damage, and this is going to make Voidforge into something that I think will be an aspirational build for a lot of players. You'll build something that's strong early, then in the middle of the league, you'll go, you know what, I got a whole bunch of currency behind me, now I'm going to buy a Voidforge, and I'm just going to play a meme build for the rest of the league. I'm going to play something silly, I'm going to play Vaal Cleave, and I'm just going to go and wreck stuff with all of the elemental damage that comes out of Voidforge. Voltaxic Rift, though, is getting a huge buff. This is going back to something far better than the old legacy versions. It's doing more than double the amount of added lightning damage it used to do, and the chaos conversion on it is getting restored from 60% to 100%. Voltaxic Rift is going to be really good. Very important thing with these items are all getting made rarer, and so are the relevant divination cards. So instead of getting a copy of the divination card for Voltaxic Rift Crangled version every time that you kill one of the Rogue Exiles, it seems, you're only probably going to get one of those maybe every 100th time you kill a Rogue Exile, and that's going to feel pretty impressive when you do put one together. There's a couple of new tools for mitigating monster life regen. I don't think many players are going to take these, but they are important to have as an option. I think this might be done with Ruthless in mind, because in Ruthless, I think it's more likely that you'll encounter a situation where you can't beat a monster's life regeneration, and maybe you don't have Frostbomb available as a support. Strike skills and additional enemies, there's a bit of rejigging around on the tree where these various stats are available, but broadly speaking, GGG's goal here is to make it so that if you're playing a melee build, you aren't forced to Path to Tribal Fury on the passive tree. You probably still will want to, but if you don't want to, then you'll be able to make a build that doesn't do so, and it will be able to be functional because you'll be able to get the +1 additional strike target from other sources. Pious Path from the Inquisitor is getting nerfed. It's not a gutting. This is going to leave Inquisitor a top 5 ascendancy. Next we come to the skill nerfs. Spectral Helix and Lightning Conduit are getting taken down a peg, and maybe actually getting taken down 2 pegs. I think that these skills are getting taken from tier 1 skills down to sort of tier 3. They're going to Soul Rend tier. From whatever they were before, they're dropping to Soul Rend tier. They're still going to be playable. If you actively like Lightning Conduit, if you actively like the playstyle of Spectral Helix, then don't let this nerf convince you that you can't play those skills. They will still be fine. However, if you actively like Lightning Strike, I've got some bad news for you. This skill is getting Starforged. Lightning Strike has been very dominant for a very long time, and it is not going to be dominant anymore. Lightning Strike is getting comprehensively gutted. It is going to fire 2 additional projectiles at all gem levels, previously 4 to 7 depending on the gem level, and it is going to have nerfs to the additional projectiles that are fired by the Labyrinth enchants as well. Basically, Lightning Strike is not completely deleted from the game, but I can't see much of a compelling reason to use it. If you want to get extraordinary single target damage, you should be using Vaal Double Strike already. It does more damage than Lightning Strike does. If you want to get extraordinary damage projection, use Frostblades instead. If you want a balance of the two, it used to be that Lightning Strike had 80-90% of the damage projection of Frostblades and 80 to 90% of the damage output of Vaal Double Strike. Now Lightning Strike is actually going to be in the middle. It's going to have some of the advantages of Frostblades, it's going to have some of the advantages of Vaal Double Strike, but it is not going to have all of the advantages of both like it used to have. It will probably still be playable, but it's going to be a shadow of what it used to be. A couple little changes to Divergent, Second Wind, and Onslaught that change their interaction with other mechanics. Withering Step and Elusive, there's going to be some minor nerfs here. This is the lightest nerf touch that they could apply to Nightblade support. It is not a gutting or anything like it, but it is a reduction in power there. Ancestor Totems are getting a new mastery that cause Ancestor Totem buffs to outlive the totem that conjured them by 3 seconds. So this is going to replace the Totem Placement Range mastery. Tainted Orbs of Fusing are getting buffed. Fracturing Orb we've already discussed. Cirrus's Arena is getting some visual clarity changes. The Endless Hunger is getting nerfed a little bit, so it's oubliette phases where it puts you down into its bowels. It's going to be a little bit easier to escape those, and that's something that I think is being done because of Ruthless. All of the bot cheaters that have been running Bestiary back-to-back are going to get gutted by this change here, which is not going to affect most players. If you're playing in solo software, this is no change. If you are playing in trade-enabled softcore, I do think this is going to mean there'll be a bit of a change in the market for Ironheart Beasts, but I don't think it's going to be anything truly dramatic unless you are someone who has been multi-boxing beast farming, in which case you have just been nerfed pretty hard. There's a number of other tiny little changes that are coming up here, but these are really insignificant. Karak League mods, it's interesting to see that Harbinger is going to give 3 Harbingers in addition to Harbingers having the Fractured Orb. The Fractured Shard, which is going to be significant. Some information on which skill gems are available where. There's a couple of little changes there. And that's really it, except for one little interesting bug fix. Fixed a bug where ROG could only offer base types that had unique weapons. ROG can now offer items of any naturally droppable weapon, armor, or jewelry base type. So this means that ROG can now offer Vermilion Rings. You've never seen these before, ROG will now have them. This is a buff. This is something, it's a pretty small buff, but it is something, and it's something that you will probably notice. There's also a few others. Cerulean Rings, I think, will also become available here, but most of the time, the changes here are going to be to the Vermilion Rings, which are the ones people care about. However, there is one big change that's hidden in this section, and that is fixed a bug where modifiers that make ailments deal damage faster incorrectly lowered the duration of poisons twice, resulting in lowering total damage dealt over the lifetime of the poison debuff. Also fix this issue for bleeding from the puncture skill. Now this is going to affect 2 major things. This is going to be a buff to the Deadeye's Rupture node, which was actively terrible in 3.19 and recently. That is going to be buffed. It may still not be all that strong, but at least it's something that's no longer going to be bugged in a way that is build destroying. And it's also going to be a significant buff to Seismic Trap poison-based builds, which I think are the big winner out of these patch notes. I don't think that those needed a buff overall, but having taken the whole of these patch notes as a package, as they currently stand a few hours after they were released, I've got to say that Seismic Trap is objectively stronger than it was in 3.19. Now in 3.19, Seismic Trap didn't actually perform all that well. One of the key reasons for this is that players overreacted to the fact that it had been nerfed, and it took a bunch of investigation by a very skilled racer named Jung Rowan. Jung Rowan then went and played Seismic Trap because he was like, oh yeah, I still think this skill is good. And he demonstrated absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt that in the hands of a skilled player like himself, Seismic Trap is still the best skill in the game for beating all of endgame on low-end gear. In the late Calandra League economy, he was able to defeat all 7 Uber bosses with an investment of approximately 150 Chaos Orbs. Now he did use one item that would not be available at that price early in a league, and that was the unique armor, the Covenant, which was 5 linked. So that's something that might be 1,000 Chaos very early in the league, but even then, the build functions without the Covenant. you will be able to do encounters like the Maven and Uber Elder very, very, very early if you're playing this build. And that is something that can generate you an enormous amount of currency. And once you've generated that enormous amount of currency, you're then in the position to be able to go and buy the Covenant, even if it is 1,000 Chaos. And then you're able to not just 5-link it, but 6-link it. And then once you've got a 6-link Covenant, you're in an extraordinarily strong position because your character is going to be miles stronger than what Jung Rowan used when he killed all of the Uber bosses on that low-budget experimental attempt. So that's something to keep in mind, that is probably one of the biggest winners out of this set of patch notes. I also think that there's a number of other things that should be considered as still very solid. Righteous Fire has had only tiny nerfs, and it was one of the best builds in the league. So if you're wanting something that is clear-oriented, and you feel like you are someone who is capable of trading early for a Legacy of Fury set of boots, then in that case, I can only recommend Righteous Fire to you. If you are someone who wants to kill bosses early, then what you want to be doing is playing Seismic Trap, the poison version, and follow Jung Rowan if you want more information on exactly how to build that. Anyways, that's all I've got. I'm going to leave it there. May your Vaal have interesting results, and I will see you around. When League Start hits, my current plans are that I will be playing the core game, so not the Ruthless version. I'll be playing that until we've worked out most of the secrets of the Forbidden Sanctum. And then after that, I'm going to re-roll in Ruthless, where I think I will have more fun. If you are someone who thinks you'll have more fun in Ruthless, then give it a go. If you're not, then you should completely ignore the mode. Thanks for your time.